let's invite all four of our speakers to come together now for a quick chat. We have, I think, 10 minutes left. We've slightly overrun, but we've got some really big ideas to unpack here. We've looked at two very different concepts of a circular economy, namely reuse and recycling. And miraculously, we have two big brand owners here who are participating in both CEFLEX and the Loop platform. So obviously, you're doing both. I'd like to ask, first of all, Gian and then Chris about this. Maybe it's fair to summarize that your approach is, let's do everything. You know, we need to investigate every type of circularity we can. At the same time, we have not just a waste problem, but carbon problem, climate crisis. Ultimately, we're going to have to pick, I guess, winners and losers in some of these different philosophical approaches to dealing with waste. Can you talk about how you approach that dichotomy and how you see it playing out? Gian, first.
Is this where? Yeah. Okay, so I think, I mean, from the presentations you've seen, and it's also in line with our goals that we are focusing on fully recyclable or reusable packaging. Obviously, currently there is a big focus also on reusable packaging. I mean, you have seen many examples from Loop. But at the end of the day, I think it's very important also to make sure that the eventual reusable pack is also considered recyclable, because at the end of its life, if it's now 1 use or 100 uses or whatever it is, it has to be recyclable as well, right? So I think all of these reuse, yes, we are running many pilots in different countries. I mean, obviously with Loop, but I also have showcased the stuff on ULE in the UK and the US. The key question is the business model working? Right, and I think we're all learning as brand owners and trying to investigate, but it seems to be a very nice proposition towards consumers as well. And I think Tom also mentioned that there are many consumers leaving comments on the Loop sites saying like, yeah, this is the right thing to do for the environment, and we embrace the new concepts, the new delivery systems through reusable packaging.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I'm not sure there's a real difference between, you know, the way we think at PepsiCo and the way P&G is looking at this. At the end of the day, a package needs to be recycled, to Gihan's point, and whether it goes around 10 times or whether it goes around once, you just need to get it to being recyclable. We need to close the plastics loop, absolutely. That's essential, but we also need to be aware of the fact that, you know, global warming is a real issue, and that becomes probably the next big issue and potentially bigger than the existing plastics one. So, you know, the attributes of plastic today, you know, from a greenhouse gas standpoint, are particularly good. Returnable plastic is actually a little bit better than returnable glass, not that much better, but obviously it's not breakable and has a lot of benefits. I think you know, Gian said it right. The future is about lots of different models. It's not about one. I think I work in a category where consumers buy product on impulse, they consume it on the go. It's very, very important that they have an option of disposing of a package in a way that they don't have to think about it, but it will be recycled. For us, it's very important that one-way packaging can be turned around. But I can equally see that going forward, there will be a Loop part of our business which will be entirely in reusable packaging, because tomorrow consumers will want different things. And, you know, the age we live in is one where we can now provide those things very efficiently to them. We've just got to work out what the best answers are. And at the bottom, it's going to be based on the metrics, ultimately, of what we put in the market.
Thank you. Tom, I'm really interested in how far you think the Loop concept can be applied and where the limits of this is. Where do you think that reuse is inherently always superior to recycling disposable packaging?
I think it's a good question, and so I'd first say there's different aspects of limit, right? One would be economics, and we heard this on business model. Another would be environmental. Is it really better for the environment? And the third would be where consumers even care, right?
Yeah.
And they're all different and not necessarily logically connected. So from a business model standpoint, the whole goal and why we're working with the world's leading producers and large retailers is to drive scale very quickly, because the faster we can drive scale, and scale is the middle name of my two colleagues on stage here, like they know it inside and out and are actually collaborating with us on the inside to develop this, not hoping we get there. That will get us to the lowest possible cost as quickly as possible. Now, in some cases, you should see equal. In some rare cases, reusable may be cheaper, but in many cases, it may be a little more, but at least in the same order of magnitude, number of zeros, let's say. That's on economic. On consumer, and we've done a lot of consumer insights in partnership with our consumer product companies, their teams, and we find that consumers gravitate to reuse when three things are true, and the more true those are, the more they gravitate. So the first is there a design improvement opportunity? And on FMCG, there's a massive design improvement opportunity, but on many things there isn't. So a high-end Swiss watch, there isn't really much more design to do. It's about as good as it gets. So the more design improvement, the better. That's one. Second is does the consumer not want to own that object? And the sooner they don't want to own it in time from purchase, the better. Coffee cup, they don't want to own it within 10 minutes of purchasing, while say a chip bag, maybe if it's a home use, maybe a week after purchasing. And the sooner you want to let go, the better. Baby products are a great example where you don't want to own them within, say, 3 months of purchasing because the baby grows out of it mentally or physically. So that shortness of ownership is good. Again, longer, like a furniture would be a little harder, though still potentially applicable. Then the third is a weird one, if there's an emotional hatred around the waste stream. Certain things in waste are hated irrationally, while others are ignored. A straw has huge hatred, and other things are completely ignored. So the more of that there's more motivation to solve. That's the second bucket. On the LCA, it really depends, this is environmental benefit, on where you started from and where you end. And if you start at the same spot as you began, like one of the private label products I showed, it immediately starts becoming better because there's not a single incremental offset you have to think about. If you go from, say, a HDPE shampoo bottle to an aluminum one, it takes about 2 to 3 uses to make it equal, and then about 5 to 7 uses is where you start seeing about a 50% benefit. So that start and stop is critically important, and not everything will fit those three premise.
Yeah. And in terms of geographies, I noticed that the launch for Loop tends to be in the very large metropolitan areas. Have you already looked at the implications of spreading that out and scaling up across more rural geographies?
Absolutely. Look, I would say at the moment, the goal is to produce success. Because if we produce success, all the stakeholders, because it's not up to me, it's up to the stakeholders believing and continuing to believe and continuing to invest in the retailers. Let's get the easy wins. The easy wins are high-density, rich countries, like Germany, but I'm from Hungary, and Hungary would be very low on the list to start at, right? Because it's poorer and won't fit as easily. So let's get the big wins, build the learnings, and do that in countries like Australia or Canada or Germany and other areas where it's going to be easier. Then, as we do that, let's think about how do we really get to the places that's actually needed the most, which is your developing markets, Laos, Cambodia, Honduras, Northern Africa. That's where actually the waste problem is most pressing. But will consumers be able to pay for deposits? Will that investment of packaging be possible? And I think we can only have that question answered once we're pivoting on a mountain of success and everyone's excited to take that next leap, if you will. Let's not set it too difficult to succeed out of the gate, I would say.
Okay, great, thanks. Yeah. Dana, I'm really interested in how you view the emergence of Loop and the concept of reusable packaging in general. Obviously, flexibles is the ultimate area of disposable, for source efficient, but not very unreusable packaging.
Yeah. I think that we really have to recognize that we have such a big of a challenge in general today with the waste management of packaging that we need a lot of different solutions. We need to be creative, and we need to develop and test, and some things which initially might become not good enough, we really owe to ourselves to test them and to allow them to prove and then improve. So in this respect, indeed, the first reaction might be, wow, no, we don't want it because it's a threat. But when you look closer, it's a way of delivering on circular economy, and this is non-negotiable. So I believe and I trust that many stakeholders in CEFLEX believe the same thing. Today, more than ever, it's true that there is a place for each material in the packaging industry. There is a role to play for each type of packaging, and we have the responsibility as stakeholders, as companies, as professionals, to develop the ideas we have, to full extent test them, but be true to the science-based facts, make sure that we do not come up with solutions which ultimately will have a negative impact on the climate change. And we will only know if we really develop, test, improve, and share learnings.
Can I just build on this? I think what you said really struck a chord with me because, and this is where Europe is really special and the rest of the world has to watch Europe. It's not one solution, it's multi-solutions because consumers want different convenience points, right? But what's so fascinating is the moment that one of these ideas, whether it's, removing packaging, like dehydrating, soaps into the example we saw, whether it's flexible film recycling, whether it's more recycled content, reusables, the moment one of those conversations begins, the organization becomes awoke to the issue, and suddenly they're way more open to taking other bets. So for example, seeing deposit return schemes start coming in Europe helps us get more people excited about loop or recycling programs, and those get other excitements, and that's the ecosystem we need to see. And I see, every country is there, but Europe is really strong on this. In countries like, say, the US, which is, it's not zero, but it's not as strong as the US, there's less of that, right? So you get a smaller ecosystem of startups and companies innovating, both large, groups doing consortiums all the way to little startups, creating new concepts. You want to push these, and frankly, they're not going to be competitive. They will be symbiotic in helping more of these get adopted.
Great, thanks. Dana pointed out the importance of following science-based approach. Obviously, we have LCAs as kind of a basis for this, but they're notoriously difficult to pin down, aren't they? And that the starting assumptions that you put into an LCA can be easily tweaked to get whatever result you want out of them. I'd like to ask the brand owners finally, is there a way that you would like to see a kind of standardization in the methodology that we use for this? Chris?
I believe that standardization across everything is important. Yeah. So when we talk about measurements of LCAs, I think it's a great example of where the world can start talking a similar language. I would argue, across borders, we need to have the same standards on recycling as well, which today is a problem for many markets in shipping products backwards and forwards. So absolutely a big fan of standardization.
Yeah, I think for me it's the same input, right? So we're heavily focusing ourselves and our choices on LCA data next to recyclability data. I think from what I've shown on Recyclaws, again, that's scientific-based, not opinion-based, right? So science is important, and we like to bring it into the recyclability industry as well. But to Dana's point, indeed, I think there is a bright future for many different materials for packaging. But the choice is going to be determined by the LCA profile, but then also the recyclability profile, right? But to Chris' point, yes, standardization would make a lot of sense, not only LCAs, but on many things like collection, recyclability rules, you name it. And Holy Grail obviously as well, right? Because if we're all doing the same, or at least if we all base ourselves on similar principles, which are scientific based, then obviously we can make a much bigger impact.
Great. Well, very sadly, we've run out of time. I'd like to continue talking for many more hours, but we have no more time. Two quick announcements. Next year, we're going to be bringing the Sustainable Packaging Summit on a larger scale to a two-day event in Lisbon in October. Lisbon is the European Green Capital 2020. We are going to be bringing a mixture of workshops, interactive events, and presentations, and we'd love you to be part of that event. Secondly, please don't go away after this. We're going to serve drinks and food now, and in 10 minutes' time, we're going to start the ceremony for the 2019 Sustainability Awards. We have some judges and some competitors on stage here, and we're all looking forward to finding out who are the winners. So thank you very much to our four fantastic speakers. It's been a great afternoon. Thank you.